Welcome, everyone. Buongiorno, bonjour. Welcome for those who are joining us here from around the world, for sure. And so appreciate everyone joining in here at various time zones. My name is Paul Sampson, President of the Center for International Governance Innovation. We're very pleased to be hosting this handover from Italy to Canada today. So the one thing that we are scarce on today is time. So if I could remind everyone to be super concise today, that'll be appreciated. There'll be lots of opportunities to have back and forth dialogue. Check out the website at think7.org if you haven't already. And so my main job is to keep things very concise and tight here. And so that's all I'm going to say. And I'm going to pass over right now to our two Italian think tank partners. We have Antonio Villafranca, who's Vice President for Research at ISPI, and we have Ettore Greco, who's Executive Vice President at the IAI. So over to you, please, and thanks for all your work.
Thank you very much, Paul. Ettore, if it is fine with you, I will start. So since time is scarce today, I will go straight to the point. As Think7 Italy, we had 4 task forces and produced 23 policy briefs involving 150 authors. And these authors also came from non-G7 countries. So, of course, we try to include as many people as possible also from other countries. ISPI in particular was in charge of 2 task forces, the first one on peace, security and global governance, and the second one on international economy. On peace and security, I would not say, Paul, that much, simply because, we have to be crystal clear. We, as Think7, advanced, of course, many proposals for peace and stability, but we all know that it's almost impossible to have an impact on those issues or high politics in these, unfortunately, very difficult international context. So when it comes to global governance, I have to say that to some extent, the voice of the think tanks were heard. For instance, we recommended G7 to act as a sort of platform to create consensus on global challenges in a way that this common sense, this common position can be jointly represented in the G20. And in the final communique of the G7, there is also something about this, on the importance of the G7 to act together in the broader context of the G20. When it comes in particular to the inclusive and fair representation of the Global South, we, of course, welcome the decision to have also the African Union as a member of the G20. And we also asked the G7 to support the creation of a third chair for Sub-Saharan Africa at the IMF, something that was included in the G7 final recommendation, final communique. When it comes also to food security, we asked the G7, and again, it is included in the G7 final communique, to highlight the importance of the synergies between the initiatives taken at the G7 level on food security and the G20 Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty. Again, it was included. When it comes finally to SDG goals, we pledged the G7 to boost the lending of the World Bank by $70 billion over the next 10 years in order to fill the gap that prevents the world from achieving the SDGs by 2030. This, unfortunately, is not fully included in the final communique of the G7. On trade and investment, the other task force, of course, what we strongly underlined is the importance to keep at least the WTO alive. We all know that there is a problem with the appointment of the judges of the appellate body of the WTO. Of course, we invited the United States to proceed with that. We know that it is difficult, but in the meantime, we should avoid a situation in which the WTO is in a standstill. And I close here because we, for instance, identified and suggest some technical ways.
Thank you very much, Antonio. Thank you. Thank you very much. We'll move on to Ettore. Thank you.
So, of course, it will be impossible. Thanks, first, Paul. It will be impossible even try to summarize the main results of task forces. But let me just emphasize once again the key message that we are trying to convey throughout this year. The need for the G7 in the present very challenging and unstable security environment to act as a bridge builder by intensifying its outreach engagement efforts towards non-member states, including those of the so-called Global South. Most of the suggestions and proposals that we have presented to the G7 leaders have revolved around this fundamental message. And indeed, the G7 faces a double challenge. On one hand, to deepen policy convergence and cooperation among its members. On the other, to undertake new initiatives that can help advance international diplomacy on key sectors of global governance and lay the groundwork for wider possible global agreements and deals. The risk that the G7 is absorbed by Western agenda priority to the detriment to its potential to create new partnerships is very real. I believe the Italian presidency was shown to be well aware of this risk, and indeed several new initiatives have been launched to try to increase dialogue and cooperation with non-Western countries. However, as we know, tensions are continuing to grow, and also we have witnessed an increasing polarization. This will no doubt be one of the key challenges of the Canadian presidencies. This is not by chance that we have chosen to concentrate our research effort on the nexus between climate change and policies and development in one of our task force. Particularly, this nexus has been at the center, as we know, of the COP20 now. The focus will continue to be on the developing on innovative finance sources for implementing climate and energy policies in the involvement of private sector, but also how to give more space to low and middle income company to advance their national program for green transition. In just a final word on a subject we have followed very closely, the Italian presidency has done, I think, a great job in trying to further develop the Hiroshima progress on AI regulation. Even in this field, there has been an effort to increase to enlarge the agenda to the problem of development, and particularly the measure that can be taken to try to limit the impact or to cope with the impact of digital divide on global inequalities. So I think the G7 has indeed a very key role to play to support the stimulating action to further deepen and enlarge the G7 agenda in close synergy, as you have tried to this year with T20. So we very much look forward to
Thank you, Ettore.
I remain fully committed to continue this endeavor together. Thanks.
Excellent. Thanks very much. Let's go to Tommaso, who's here from the Presidency of the Council of Ministers. All the bios are being put in the chat, as well as the names. Tommaso.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. I'll try to be as brief as possible. Just let me begin by congratulating with the T7 for the extremely prolific work done this year. Antonio, I haven't written down the number of outputs that you put that, but I was quite impressed with that. I'll give you just a few informations about where we came from, what we did, and then a small glance on how do we see the G7 evolving next year. As you know, Italy took the presidency in a moment of global structural challenges and geopolitical crisis, and we focus on these two approaches. Indeed, we believe that we reinforce the role of the G7 as a control tower, let's say, of democratic nations in delivering a response to geopolitical crisis and shaping long-term structural challenges. Has the G7, we spearheaded the G7 efforts and actions to control the escalating tensions in the Middle East, but also our support for Ukraine was steady this year, and a landmark achievement of our presidency was for sure delivering the 50 billion loan package for Ukraine, supporting the resilience. As Ettore Greco said, great efforts from our side was geared towards enlarging the action of the G7 beyond the G7 perimeter itself in tackling global and structural challenges. Indeed, we focus pretty much on the Indo-Pacific area, but we also increase, we believe, cooperation with the African continent, inspired by also our Mattei plan, where we champion mutually beneficial models of cooperation with developing and emerging economies. Few examples of this cooperation: the Apulia Food System initiatives that advances sustainable and resilient food systems in the African continent, and as was highlighted by the speakers before, we did that working in cooperation with the G20 Brazilian presidency. Energy for Growth in Africa, that aims at mobilizing resources to develop energy infrastructure in the continent, or the GAI Hub for Sustainable Development, which aims at supporting the development of AI technologies in developing countries and exploit the AI for the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goal. We focused on many other topics that I see reflects the priorities of the T7, but also the next year works. For instance, AI. We worked and promoted the adoption of an ethical approach when it comes to developing and deploying these new technologies and controlling the risks. We advanced the work of the G7 by launching an action plan for AI in the world of work. And as Ettore Greco said, we also move forward in the AI Hiroshima AI process in terms of accountability frameworks. We have been touching upon and discussing many other issues. Migration was a prominent one. We launched a coalition our coalition against migrant smuggling to disrupt criminal networks. But nevertheless, we also focused on economic security and the Indo-Pacific as well. So very briefly, in this year's, and I close, the work with the engagement group has been pivotal, and we could really rely on the support of the T7. And here, let me thank the Institute for International Affairs and the Institute for International Political Studies. As Antonio said, your voice was heard, and we're grateful for the extensive collaboration that we had also informally throughout the year. When we look ahead next year, of course, we will work with the G7 Canadian presidency to ensure continuity of these achievements and to adapt to an ever-changing global scenario. We have an ever-changing political landscape. The G7 reacts to these changes. So we will see how it will develop. There are electoral changes, like in Washington, in Berlin, there will be elections, and in France also. So the G7 will adapt to these changes, but we're strongly convinced that we will remain committed in supporting future presidency and ensuring that the G7 remains a guiding force for global processes. I stop here, and I thank you again for the amazing work that you have done this year.
Tommaso, thank you very much. Thank you to our think tank colleagues in Italy, the Italian government, for this handoff and for the great work that's been done. So we're moving into the first session, and the one takeaway I would say that I think is really important here from all the Italian colleague comments is that the T7 is really a T7 plus. There are very few G7 only issues, right? There might be a couple, but you'd be hard pressed to identify them. So this is a global conversation that we're heading into, right? So the first session here, we wanted to talk about the role of the Think 7 in global cooperation. It's a general topic. We're going to start with a video from Tetsushi Sonobe, who's the Dean of the Asian Development Bank Institute and well known to many of you, who's been a leader on T7 activities. He couldn't join us here personally, but he really wanted to send a few words in on a video. So we're going to turn to that, and then we'll turn to the other speakers.
It's an honor and a pleasure to provide some remarks at the T7 handover from Italy to Canada. Thank you, Paul, for this opportunity. I would also like to thank two co-chairs in Italy, EI and ISPI, for managing the policy brief process efficiently and for convening many lively discussions on critically important issues. Now, at the very beginning of T7 Canada, I ask myself why I want to join T7 again. At least for me, T7 is very valuable because it provides me with a good opportunity to work with other think tanks from other countries, helping me and them build trust relationship, thereby enabling us to exchange views and opinions on major issues and delicate issues frankly. And I believe we need frank exchanges because we as think tanks want to help politicians and the public make informed decisions. And because the information that these people should have includes the fact that the other countries are making great efforts to address global challenges just like our own countries, and the fact that the other countries cannot easily make big progress because they face a variety of difficulties just like our own countries. Without knowing these facts, it will be difficult for people to trust their counterparts in other countries, and hence it will be difficult for them to cooperate with each other, and instead they would choose to blame other countries or choose to be free riders when concerted efforts are indispensable. My argument might sound complicated, so let me simplify a little. I'm saying that knowing each other is the basis for cooperation. T7 helps think tanks know each other and build trust relationship, but people rarely have such an opportunity. So think tanks should work together closely to bridge people in different countries, help them build trust relationship beyond national borders, and help them achieve global cooperation that is definitely necessary to address global challenges such as climate change, geoeconomic tensions, and threats to multilateral organizations and other global public goods. Of course, T7 is not the only opportunity for think tanks to do so, but it's very valuable and should not be forgone. I'd like to urge all think tank colleagues across the world to join T7 Canada, which is open and inclusive. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you, Dean Sonobe, in absentia. We'll turn now to Christian Kastrop, who's the CEO for the Global Solutions Initiative in Berlin. Many of you would know it. It's one of the key global conversations and integral to the T7. Christian, over to you.
Thank you, Paul. First, Antonio and Team Italy, thanks so much for T7 Italy for a great and very effective T7 work, from the critical developments in the Mediterranean region also to a global outreach underlying importance of G7, also as part, of course, of the G20 group. Yeah, Paul and Team Canada, a great welcome. The Canadian presidency, I see, will follow the route, identifying and tackle VIP global issues, special also the digital issues, also as an aspect of geopolitics. So T7 will uphold its core in advising future global policies for the global common goods. T7 has never been a static academic engagement group, as we see it, but a dynamic coalition of think tanks with a long-standing history of collaboration. Also, Tetsushi alluded to that. It serves as a springboard for action, translating research into bold cross-border political strategies and informed by scientific evidence. So in an increasingly fragmented world, the T7 should develop and offer bold solutions and foster geopolitical collaboration, going even beyond the G7 traditional frameworks and catalyze meaningful global progress. So GSI, of course, also Paul mentioned it, we are offering and prepare bridges for this G7, T20, G20 work, so fostering progress on shared priorities. And you're all invited to the Global Solutions Summit 5th and 6th of May. So some words to Canada and the digital focus. I think the Hiroshima process under Japan's G7 laid a strong foundation on AI governance. Italy advanced this with safeguards for ethical, secure, and sustainable AI development. And again, Canada's leadership, supported by CIGI's work on digital transformation and AI governance, really promises to build on these achievements. So we as other TG institutions look forward, collaborating with you on advancing these discussions within your presidencies, which could also be then an additional opportunity we together create to move the future agenda towards a renewed and fair global governance. I think this is really the top topic 80 years after Bretton Woods. And T7, T20 cooperation could play for us an important role facilitating this most needed big project we really need to push forward together. Good luck, G7 Canada. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian. Let's go right away to Luciana Servo, who is professor and head of the Institute for Applied Economic Research in Brazil. Welcome.
Thank you, Paul Samuelson. Thank you also for the T7 Italy for this handover session. IPE is one of the institutions that were part of the organizing committee of T20 during Brazilian G20 presidency, together with SEBRI and FUNAG. And as the 7 countries from the T7 are also part of the T20s, as said here, important to look at the synergies and potential collaborations of the agenda of T7 and T20, strengthen the bridge between them. There are some important common grounds in the discussion of disengagement groups from G7 and G20. First, the climate change and sustainability agenda. The think tanks that collaborate simultaneously in T7 and T20 have put forward the importance of this common goal around the mitigation and around the mitigation of the climate change, but the T20 have also stressed the importance of thinking about adaptation, leverage affordable climate and sustainable development finance, including resources needed to promote just energy transition, and provide capacity building, technological transfer, and adequate funding for national transition plans, including measures to leverage climate adaptation and bioeconomy. The other agenda that is also common is the digital transformation. In the G20 and T20, we propose in the T20 to establish a Data 20, a multi-stakeholder platform to enhance cooperation on global data governance and serve as a hub for collaboration across G7, G20, and existing formal engagement groups promoting discussion and formulating policies, promotes the leverage benefits, promote accountability, and reduce harms associated with production and use of data. Also improve cooperation and enhance meaningful connectivity, including DPIs and human-centered AI. That also the importance and the most challenging thinking about global governance reform that are necessary to build a just world and a sustainable planet. We also strengthen the importance that has been put during the G20 Brazilian presidency of inequality and inclusion. That seems to be stronger in T20, but also is getting support from the T7 in some respects. Strengthen the effectiveness and efficiency of multilateral institutions by building trust, accountability, and inclusion. As has been said by Antonio Villafranca, it's also important to see that the underdeveloped countries are being considered in the T7 agenda, and also the idea of the support that has been received from the T7, the G7, for the Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty. As you can see, there are lots of common agendas in the T7 and in T20 and in the G7 and the T20. And I'm sure that the T20 presidency during the G20 Canada will be also going further in these alliances. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Luciana, so much, and congratulations on the work that Brazil did this year in the G20. So next we have Philippe Borbeau, who's a professor of business at HEC Montréal.
Oh, hi. Thanks. Thanks, Paul. Yes, professor of international business at HEC Montréal, which is the main business school in the Francophone area of Canada, and perhaps even throughout the world. It's a major player in international businesses. I'm also co-director of the International Institute of Economic Diplomacy. What do we do at the Institute? We try to connect three players: scholars, policymakers, and most importantly, in our case, CEOs and VP and businesses in general, because we do believe that they have a voice, and it's a voice that wants to be heard. And we, as a business school, believe that the Institute is the perfect place for that. We work on two things, and I want you to keep these two research teams in mind. The first one, we have more than two, but I think in this context, these two apply directly. The first one is organizational resilience. How an organization, we're talking about WTO earlier, how an organization, a business, an enterprise survive a shock. And the second one is geopolitical risk and the influence on international business. So more than happy to participate in this T7 initiative, and looking forward in partnership with CIGI. And a big thank you to Paul for inviting me on this panel, and looking forward to working with you in the near future.
Thank you for joining us, Philippe. The next person I'm going to introduce is John Curtin, who I think the apt description would be to say he is the OG of G7 and G20 processes to some degree, and he's been leading work at the University of Toronto as a professor, including archiving a lot of the work of the G7 and G20, which is a global commons resource. So, John, we're delighted you could join us here today and give some words. Over to you.
Merci, Paul. Bonjour et bienvenue, chers collègues. The Think 7 first took full flight in its current form when Canada last hosted the G7 in 2018. Our work culminated when the leading thinkers from all G7 members met face-to-face with the Sherpas of all G7 leaders, including Donald Trump's, at their last scheduled Sherpa meeting before the summit start. That interactive dialogue fostered a detailed discussion of the Think 7's recommendations and allowed the Sherpas to more easily buy into them. This year, as we've heard, a new peak was reached when the IAI and ISPE produced the Think 7 for Italy's Apulia summit. Its work and recommendations were enormously enriched by the extensive work these two leading think tanks and their international colleagues had done for several years on the G7 as an institution and its key issues, and by their important role in the Think 20 that supports the G7's offspring, the group of 20 systemically significant states. This rich experience shows that the Think 7 is most valuable and effective when its recommendations are easily converted into commitments by G7 leaders at their summit and then complied with. That is, implemented through real action by their governments during the following year. These recommendations realize that the G7 is nearly not a piggy bank with money of its own to give for the particular cause the Think 7 policy breed authors prefer, nor is it a think tank itself designed to conduct yet more research, nor are recommendations to create yet another G7 working group or platform or low-level institutional process adequate to confront the critical interconnected crises the global community faces today. So in 2025, the Think 7's recommendations should be highly ambitious as well as achievable by G7 leaders at their Kananaskis summit and leader-like, worthy of the unique power and potential of this combination of the most powerful leaders of the most powerful advanced democracies in the world. Finally, the Think 7's work is vital for global cooperation through the G7 in two key ways. First, action to implement G7 leaders' promises on paper depends not only on the behavior by their own governments, but also on that of a supportive civil society. And the Think 7 and its sister civil society engagement groups are the great connectors, bringing their expertise, experience, views, influence, and capacity into the G7 governors' work and bringing the latter's commitments back to civil society so they can help their governors accomplish their shared goals. Second and finally, the Think 7 is unique among the expanding community of G7 civil society engagement groups, the formal and informal ones. Ours is an analytic, not an advocacy one. All the others ask, do more for me and my constituency, business for the B20, labor for L20, and so on down the line. The Think 7 is the only one that doesn't. It never says do more for think tanks. It always says do more for the global community as a whole through the G7. And it thus shares this comprehensive vision with the G7 leaders themselves, and adds how doing this can help those governors work better for all of the citizens they were elected to serve and who are influenced by their work. Merci.
Thanks very much, John, for those comments. Implementable, leader-like ambition, and so we will take that with us. We're moving over now to Tracy Forrest, who is the Research Director for Transformative Technologies at CIGI. And Tracy, we're passing over to you a couple minutes behind, but not brutally behind, but we're still pretty tight for time. Over to you.
Great, thank you very much, Paul. Hello, it's my pleasure to be introducing our second session today on technology at the center of governance challenges. It should be no surprise to anyone here that technology is so important and increasingly the dominant issue that confronts our government and policymakers. As technology governance evolves around the world, governments are facing complex policy tensions, such as balancing innovation with security, managing new forms of risk, and determining the appropriate level of oversight. So we are witnessing the digital plus energy transformation and multiple general purpose technologies coming together, and these forces are unlocking opportunities for our society and economy while also revealing their dual use nature and raising critical questions around access, fairness, and competition, in particular, given the rising asymmetric power advantage we see with the increasing technology concentration. This year, we're going to look at a broad set of emerging technologies with a bit of a focus on AI and quantum. It is an important year for both these technologies, given the extraordinary levels of capital investment in their orbit and in their, of course, inherent powerful capabilities. And 2025 is the International Year of Quantum as well. As co-chair of the Task Force on Transformative Technologies, I look forward to working with my co-chairs and researchers around the world to examine these technologies with the view to promote innovation and ensure ethical standards, security, and equitable access. And of course, advance policy ideas that align with the priorities of G7 plus nations to shape a prosperous future for us all. With us today to address technology and governance is an exceptional lineup of 4 speakers. And for brevity, I'll simply state their name, title, and affiliation and turn the floor over to them to provide us with a brief statement in turn. So first off, we have Lisa Lambert. She is the CEO of Quantum Industry Canada. And to echo Paul's refrain, we're going to encourage our speakers to keep it to less than 3 minutes. Lisa, over to you.
Grazie, merci, Tracy. Thank you all. It's an absolute honor to be with you today. As Ernest Hemingway once described how major shifts happen, gradually, then suddenly. And I think this perfectly captures where we stand with quantum technology today. The gradual phase of decades of research and development is approaching the suddenly, the rapid emergence of a new transformative global industry, which is no longer a distant prospect. Quantum technologies harness the fundamental properties of nature at the atomic scale. Some, like quantum sensors and quantum cryptography, are already being deployed, and others, like large-scale quantum computers and networks, are developing at a rapid rate. Together, these technologies will revolutionize everything from materials and drug development to climate modeling. They'll transform precision measurement and reshape how we secure our communications. As we prepare for the G7 presidency to transition to Canada in 2025, and as Tracy mentioned, this is also the International Year of Quantum, we have an unprecedented opportunity to shape this emergence thoughtfully and consider the global implications. History has taught us very valuable lessons. It's up to us if we choose to learn them. We see this playing out right now with AI, where the suddenly caught most by surprise 2 years ago, and we're now doing our best to play catch up with a reactionary approach. We've seen how critical supply chains and semiconductors can become vulnerabilities and how lack of coordination can lead to incompatible standards. In Canada alone, which has been an early global leader in quantum, Quantum Industry Canada unites almost 70 organizations. And globally, alongside our partners at the International Council of Quantum Industry Associations, we represent nearly 600 stakeholders across the G7 nations and the EU and beyond. Never before has the global sector and area of transformative technology mobilized so early and in such a collaborative way working with government. The current geopolitical climate makes international collaboration among like-minded countries not just beneficial, but essential. The imperative to deploy quantum secure cybersecurity alone demands unprecedented cooperation. Yet these challenges present opportunities to demonstrate how allied nations like the G7 can work together to build something revolutionary. No single nation can build a thriving ecosystem that can nurture quantum technologies to their full potential. Success requires shared investment, coordinated supply chains, common standards, aligned workforce development, and large markets large enough to sustain continued innovation. And most importantly, it requires trust in our shared commitment to developing these technologies responsibly together. The suddenly phase of quantum technology is approaching, but unlike previous technological revolutions, we're not caught off guard. How we act now with foresight, collaboration, and shared purpose will determine whether we can harness its full potential for global good. The governance challenges before us aren't just technical. They're a test of our collective wisdom to guide innovation thoughtfully across borders. And by rising to this challenge together, we can show that international cooperation can not only keep pace with technological innovation, but enhance it. The quantum sector looks forward to working with this group, the G7, in this pivotal year ahead as Canada assumes the G7 presidency and as the world celebrates the International Year of Quantum, and of course, as the suddenly for quantum gets nearer on the horizon. Together, we can ensure that 2025 marks not just a moment of technological advancement, but a milestone of global governance. Thank you, merci, grazie. Back to you, Tracy.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Lisa. And up next, we have Anna-Katharina Hornrich. She is the director of the German Institute of Development and Sustainability and professor for Global Sustainable Development at the University of Bonn. I hope I got that right. Anna-Katharina, over to you.
Thank you so much, Tracy. Thanks, Paul, for the invitation. It's exciting to be here with all of you in this group. I want to shed light on the Pact for the Future that was, we all witnessed it, decided on this September. And the Pact for the Future, for the first time actually on the level of the General Assembly of the United Nations, focused on science, technology, research and development. Yeah? So this topic for the first time was so prominently discussed by UNGA. I would like to carry this discussion into the G7 advisory process under Canada's leadership upcoming 2025, and would suggest to highlight or to particularly focus here on two elements in then digging deep into science policy and technology innovation system development. One is that indeed our science systems are structured by substantial power asymmetries simply because of the fact that they're equipped in many different ways or to different degrees. And it means that we again and again witness that our science systems at large do not really enable us to deal with the planetary challenges the way we should do, but rather we reproduce the inequalities in the system to the degree that the solutions that we develop in carrying transformative processes towards sustainability forward are not fitting well enough in enough contexts, no? Or this lack of fit comes up again and again. And of course, that then brings me to the second sort of framing of the topic, and that's the whole open science debate. That is an up-and-coming debate, at the same time very difficult debate in a world that is increasingly characterized by a geopolitization of knowledge-related discussions. And here I think one of the challenges, but also positive tasks for us could be to develop ways and modi of operandi that are indeed ensuring that, yes, science policy making and open science is political, but it should not be geopolitical. And that will be one of the core challenges in the years to come. I'm really looking forward to cooperating with all of you on this. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Anna-Katharina. I'm going to now turn it over to Professor Hossein Ranama. Hossein is the Associate Professor, Toronto Metropolitan University, and Visiting Associate Professor at MIT Media Lab. Over to you, Hossein. Nice to see you.
Thank you, Tracy, and thanks, Paul, for hosting me. As a Canadian, it's a pleasure to be able to host the G7 in the country, and a big thanks to our Italian colleagues, and very much looking forward to further collaboration. as within G7, we are thinking about cooperation in a fragmented world. I believe that there is a new economy that we can envision that allows us to collaborate even better. And in this economy, I believe that data is a new asset class, trust is a new currency, and AI, if understood correctly and being used effectively, can be a driver of a new economy that can allow us to collaborate further and further. But in order to use it, in order to execute effectively well, we need to come up with a new framework. And in this framework, we really need to educate and develop literacy to people and to our communities and citizens to understand that AI is not just a technology. It is going to be something that will change many aspects of our society, and we need to have literacy programs, not just for boards of directors and our corporate leaders, but also for the rest of the society, including our K-12 programs and children's education programs. We have to understand the importance of data, data governance, data auditability, data privacy, because AI without data is meaningless. And if we learn within our collaboration on how to use data effectively, we will be able to develop new business models and economic models that allow us to contribute more and more to our economic prosperity. I think we have to cherish what we are doing well as countries in G7. I think we are excellent when it comes to research dissemination and scientific discovery. We need to encourage more and more talent mobility. I have the privilege of working with many great Italian and Canadian minds in my capacity as a professor at MIT. But also, I think we should do things better in terms of translating those research into societal, economic, and ecological impacts. And I think by creating that holistic frameworks, we will be able to create examples for the rest of the world on how AI and quantum can be a key driver in the prosperity of our nation. Thank you.
That was fantastic. Thank you very much, Hussein. And finally, delivering his remarks via pre-recorded message is Syed Manur Khosru. He's the chairman of the Institute for Policy, Advocacy, and Governance.
It's a great pleasure for me to be joining my friends in the T7 community on this wonderful auspicious occasion where the presidency of G7 T7 is being handed over from Italy to Canada. First of all, I would like to congratulate my friends in the Italian T7 community for doing a wonderful job in the last 1 year. A lot of important issues, tackling climate change, building economic resilience, ensuring digital inclusivity, then showcasing Apulia Food Security Initiative, AI Hub for Sustainable Development. A lot of good things have happened. So they hand over the presidency to our Canadian friends in a rather strong position. Now, Canada is taking over presidency at a time where the world has been mired in geopolitics, both the Ukraine war and also tension in the Middle East. And interestingly, as the mantle moves to France to 2026, Canada and France already are working together in many important initiatives. Now, since the particular area I've been asked to speak on has to do with technology and digital platforms, I would like to share in the next couple of minutes my personal observations. Having led some of the G20 digital transform task forces, what has been encouraging to see that has been, even as we speak, and most of the, if not all of the top tech companies, whether it's Alphabet, Meta, Microsoft, Amazon, are in G7 countries, particularly the United States. And the total worth of these companies is close to $12 trillion, which is 4 times more than the total GDP of African continent. So you can see how significant this gap is. Good thing is many of the tech companies are coming forward. For example, Microsoft has committed $5 billion investment in building digital infrastructure. Alphabet, Google is investing money on building fiber optic cables connecting Africa with Asia Pacific. So Canada has a unique opportunity to lead from the front, build this multi-stakeholder in the tech area, government, tech companies, then also civil society engagement. Another thing I would like to draw attention is the increasing risk we are having in the cyber domain, particularly women and children. In middle December, UN is convening an Internet Governance Forum where I will be speaking in the panel on protecting children and women in the cyberspace. Particularly, even as we speak, 12% of women have protection against cyber sexual harassment. So even as we take advantage of AI and make use of this positive effect on achieving sustainable development goals like SDG 1, which is poverty alleviation. Then we have SDG 5, quality education. We have SDG 11, smart cities. It's a great opportunity for both being optimistic and also being careful to safeguard the risk that we take. So with that note of optimism, I wish my Canadian friends every success and would be very happy to participate, support in the technology platform as we try to connect the dotted lines between the Italian, Canadian, and French G7 presidencies. I wish you all the best. Looking forward to working with you soon. Thank you so much.
That closes out our session. Over to you, Paul.
Thanks very much, Tracy. Thanks, everyone. So we're into this last session here where we wanted to talk about looking ahead for next year. We're obviously not going to say everything that's going on, but a couple of key things to note. And the one thing I'll say by way of introduction, because we're tight on time, so I'll sacrifice my couple of minutes to give to the other speakers here, is that if everyone agrees we're in a moment of change and turbulence, I heard that in pretty much every statement, that creates risks, but both to the upside and the downside, right? In the sense of there could be some very positive opportunities coming out of the change and turbulence ahead. So we're trying to identify those and use them, leverage them, catalyze them, etc. And we've got a great set of speakers here that are going to comment a little bit on that. The first one is Deepali Khanna, who's in Bangkok right now, and I understand it's getting pretty late there, so thank you for joining us. And she has been a leader on the think tank discussions for some time. She's the vice president for Asia at the Rockefeller Foundation. Deepali, over to you.
Thank you so much, and greetings, ladies and gentlemen. What an honor it is to be part of this gathering today and to witness its history in the making. Having contributed to task forces across the G20 and G7 over the years, and especially as a fellow Canadian, this is a particularly special moment for me. So even though I'm in Bangkok, but my heart is in Canada, my heartfelt congratulations to the teams at ISPI and IAI for your impressive leadership of T7 2024. If I may highlight one key aspiration for the year ahead, it would be fostering greater constructive collaboration between the G7 and G20, driven by deeper collaboration between T7 Canada and T20 South Africa. A few years ago at the Rockefeller Foundation, we recognized the critical need for enhanced cooperation between the G20 and G7 to address shared global challenges. At that time, Asia played a pivotal role with Japan leading the G7 presidency and India steering the G20 presidency, both making remarkable contributions. In 2023, think tank engagement groups, G20 is India's T20 and G7 Japan's T7, alongside counterparts from G20 Indonesia, G7 Germany, and those preparing for G20 Brazil and G7 Italy, convened at the Rockefeller Foundation's Bellagio Center for a groundbreaking retreat. This is the first such meeting since the G20 Development Agenda was established in Seoul in 2010. We were joined by Sherpas, senior officials, and many of the distinguished individuals present here today. The 10 priorities we identified for G7, G20 collaboration were a milestone marking the beginning of a significant agenda. The T20 and T7 committed to partnering with their networks to draft effective solutions and policies. These priorities span critical areas, including sustaining the Agenda 2030, strengthening climate action through enhanced climate finance, fostering balanced global economic recovery, advancing reforms in multilateral development banks, and much more. Together, we really urge the world leaders to take bold, unified action to reinvigorate the 2030 agenda. On the sidelines of the G7 summit in Italy, the Munich Security Conference, supported by the Rockefeller Foundation, we brought together leading politicians and thinkers at Lake Como. So the Munich strategy retreat focused on ensuring a multipolar international order that addresses pressing global challenges equitably. Now, as we approach the G7 Canada and G20 South African presidencies, I would like us to reflect on the three guiding principles that have consistently emerged from our discussions: coordination, cooperation, and convergence. Coordination to bring together the diverse actors within this group. Cooperation to foster active engagement and collaboration towards shared goals. Convergence to develop cohesive approaches to addressing global challenges. By embracing these principles, I honestly believe we can unlock solutions to some of the world's most urgent issues. We've been hearing about the challenges, but there are many opportunities out there. The world is certainly not on track to meet several of the SDGs, nor the NDCs central to the Paris Agreement. Meanwhile, we are witnessing escalated climate impacts from extreme heat waves to devastating floods and rampant wildfires. While our work is far from complete, the foundation we have built is strong. Let's really continue advancing global public good with a shared commitment. Thank you and my very best wishes.
Thank you, Deepali. Good segue here because we're next going to South Africa. We have Alex Benkenstein, who's the head of climate and natural resources at the South African Institute for International Affairs. Alex, over to you. You're still on mute for the moment.
Thank you. My director, Elizabeth Sideropoulos, sends her warmest regards and apologies for not being able to join you. But let me jump straight into it. I think like many who've spoken earlier, I have turbulence underlined in my notes. We're looking at the year ahead. It's a kind of unique confluence of international processes. Of course, we're a decade into the SDGs. We're a decade from the signing of the Paris Agreement. On the SDGs, 2/3 of the road to that all-important milestone, 2030, of course, critical for a lot of global processes and global commitments, whether it be on biodiversity, on climate action, and of course, the UN Development Agenda. This is also in the mood where I don't know how many of you have attended COP29, but I think that sense of anxiety that has come through in some of the remarks made here, I think is being matched, if not overwhelmed, by a sense of climate fatigue, shall we say, and certainly in the context of this turbulent international space of increasing geostrategic competition. There are going to be real challenges as we head into next year. It's going to be no doubt that our commitment to multilateral cooperation and multilateral solutions is going to be tested. Of course, we've got Brazil hosting the climate COP30 next year, and South Africa taking over the G20 from Brazil. I think without going into too much detail about South Africa's approach, the theme emphasized by South Africa has been solidarity, equality, and sustainability. There's a real emphasis on continuity, on the excellent work that's been done by Brazil, but also recognizing South Africa stands last in a line of Global South G20 presidencies. And South Africa also has a unique opportunity to elevate the voice of the African Union as a new G20 member within G20 processes. So this is the thinking. I certainly can say that there's openness to the collaboration on the T20 side that's been spoken about. South Africa, our institute is one of 3 organizations that will be hosting the T20 Secretariat, and I think there's a lot of opportunities to further explore synergies, collaboration, and that all-important word that's also been mentioned, bridge building. So I think let's keep the dialogue going, let's keep it open, and I think a commitment from us certainly that we're open to engagement into the following year.
Thank you so much, Alex. So we have 2 speakers left, and then we're going to hear from the Government of Canada to wrap up. Patricia Fuller is the CEO of the International Institute for Sustainable Development in Canada and one of the chairs of one of the task forces of the T7. Patricia.
Thank you, Paul, and great discussion so far, and my thanks to the Italian colleagues for the handover. So as we have pulled our task force together, I'm pleased to tell you that we have great representation from the broader G20 to the point that's been made so far around the need for G7, G20 collaboration. So we have heads of think tanks from Brazil, South Africa, and Indonesia, as well as from France. So as we look forward to 2025 and this context which has been well described, certainly a key question for 2025 is, will global emissions peak? And if they do, what's clear is that they're not descending rapidly. They will not descend rapidly enough to get us onto a sustainable path without additional ambition. So how does the G7 in this complex time drive that ambition? We have, as a task force, framed 4 areas. Energy security is the first of those, energy security in the climate crisis, which we think that energy security framing, it resonates in the global south, of course, where energy security is so critical, as well as in other G7 jurisdictions. And what we need from the G7 is to push forward on the commitments around tripling renewables, doubling energy efficiency, eliminating fossil fuel subsidies, coming with ambitious NDCs, and that's something that they can each do individually, setting up for success at COP 30. And the second area is financing, and that the COP29 outcome of tripling support from 100 to 300 billion annually is a step forward, but clearly the G7 needs to do more to push the financing agenda forward. There's unfinished business from the biodiversity COP that was held in Cali and suspended. And so the financial mechanisms around that will be taken up again in February. The G7 is going to be critical in the leadership around that, or at least members of the G7. And then looking forward to the Financing for Development meeting in Spain in June. The G7 needs to help send the signals that can result in success there around really transformation of the global international financial architecture and the governance of those institutions. Thirdly, thematic we've landed on for our task force is sustainable and resilient infrastructure, and this does definitely build on the work of Italy and the important work around sustainable infrastructure, particularly in Africa, and the need for resilience. And then finally, industrial decarbonization and sustainable trade. Industrial emissions account for 1/4 of global emissions, and there's a real opportunity here around things like cooperation on standards, where the G7 can drive that forward and frankly alleviate, if done well, some of the mounting tensions around trade and sustainability. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. Aaron Schull, Managing Director and General Counsel at CIGI. The good news is you are the final speaker before Martin, so you get a final word. The bad news is you only have 1 minute to do it. So over to you, Aaron.
All good. I bill in 6-minute increments, as you know, so I'll be brief. If I had to do it in one word, I'd say uncertainty. Over the next year, uncertainty. And there's 5 trend lines that I think are more pronounced now than they were the last time that Canada hosted the G7. Number 1 is political tribalism. It is worse than anything I've ever seen in my lifetime, for sure. And we've got ourselves in this perverse situation where the identity of the speaker matters more than the content of what they're saying. So now we'll find ourselves in a situation where people will disagree with good ideas as a consequence of the identity of the speaker. Number 2, the communication channels are getting shorter and the policy problems are getting longer or more complex, as well as people's attention spans. And I think we're all seeing this. Number 3, capacity in government presents its own challenges. We tend to structure ourselves vertically, and I haven't heard a single challenge in this discussion that lends itself well to that. Climate change, trade, intellectual property, tech development, these are all horizontally integrated policy challenges, but our governments are not staffed that way. Number 4 is AI. It's been prescient throughout this conversation. I think largely we've probably overestimated the short-term impacts and underestimated the long-term impacts. So that is something that we're going to have to get our hands on. And number 5, technology just generally, the change velocity that we're seeing is messing with just about every governance piece of architecture you can imagine, and the processes involved in them. The one guarantee I can give you is that the Italians set the bar high. Ettore and Antonio structured the T7 with the highest degree of professional excellence. They've left big shoes for Canada to fill, and I only hope we can do it. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Aaron. And congratulations to everyone again. So we're wrapping up here now with Martin Lajoie, who is a director in the G7 G20 Summits Bureau, the Government of Canada, Global Affairs Canada. Thanks for joining us, Martin. Over to you for a few closing observations of where we're heading.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Paul. Bonjour. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. It's a pleasure for me to join you today. I'm joining you from the unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe, known as Ottawa for some of you. First, I'd like to thank CIGI for this overview on the plans for the T7 presidency and the valuable insights from the panelists looking ahead to 2025. I would also like to extend my appreciation to the Italian T7 team and their hard work and dedication. I must say that your efforts have made the 2024 T7 process a resounding success, including producing an impactful communique and other documents that supported the overall G7 policy dialogue, which the Canadian Sherpa team had read certainly with keen interest. Regarding to next year, as you know, Canada will be hosting the next G7 Leaders Summit in Kananaskis, Alberta, from June 15th to the 17th. The G7 has been central to Canada's global role and engagement, and really it represents a gathering not only of our strongest allies, but also our closest friends. So with that in mind, it will come to no surprise to you that many of the issues that you raised today are also top of mind for us. And so next year, Canada will advance common priorities, such as building economies that benefit everyone, fighting climate change, and managing rapidly evolving technologies. Gender equality is also is a constant priority for Canada and the G7 agenda, and we will aim to integrate this across our work. We were certainly delighted that the G7 Gender Equality Advisory Council, established during our Canada's presidency in 2018, has completed a full G7 presidency cycles. And then we certainly extend, again, our gratitude to our Italian colleagues for their leadership and look forward to carrying the GIAC work forward in 2025. Navigating the rapidly evolving geopolitical landscape will also continue to be a top priority. This will come to no surprise to all of you. And we will also strive to create synergies and align with broader efforts, including fora like the G20 under the South African presidency. And as in the past, Canada will adopt a targeted approach, focusing on a smaller number of ministerial meetings with clear emphasis in advancing strategic priorities. And we will have more to share on that in the future. When it comes to engagement, so engagement with various stakeholders and partners is also a pillar on how we approach the G7. We look forward to working with engagement groups next year, including the T7. We are confident that there will be opportunity for the Sherpa team to engage with CIGI as well as your colleagues across the various T7 tracks to help inform Canada's G7 presidency priorities. And I should know that Canada has a special relationship with the T7. Collaboration goes well back to 2018 when the T7 in its current form was set up as an engagement group under the Canadian Charlevoix presidency. In January, our Sherpa, Cindy Termerchisen, will host a call with all the 2025 engagement partner chairs, including CIGI, where she hopes to be able to share more details about Canada's G7 agenda. So with that, I will conclude my remarks. Again, I'd like to take a moment to thank the Italian T7 team for their hard work convening and providing strategic advice to leaders throughout the Italian T7 processes. And we are certainly thrilled to continue our partnership with the T7 team for the next year's Canada's presidency, and we look forward to strengthening our partnership and contributing to successful and important dialogue going forward. Again, a real pleasure to see so many familiar faces on screen. Some are friends, others are former colleagues. So looking forward to this continued dialogue.
Thank you, Martin. Merci. So we're closing up here now. I'd like to give a shout out to our rock star organizers here, Jenny and Anne, who made this possible smoothly. Thank you to everyone here who was very concise and crisp and very insightful. We're heading into an exciting and energizing year and hope we see everyone engaging on this space. Stay tuned and see you soon. Be well, everyone, and thanks again.